Hello friends, this is Tom Swiss here with you again for another experiment in video blogging. Today I'd like to talk about the latest post up on the Zen Pagan, which was titled Manifest the King, Honor the Ancestors. Finally got this post done this past weekend while I was at Wisteria for Autumn Fires, but it's actually about some lessons learned at Starwood this past July. So yeah, it took me 3 months to write this, and yeah, that's probably an excessive amount of time. But sometimes I'm a little slow. Um, and what it comes down to, uh, this first point, manifest the king. I am a long way from famous, but there are a few places and contexts where I'm known. People, I walk in, people go, "Oh, hey, it's that guy," and one of those is the Starwood Festival. Now, for those of you who I say Starwood, and you're like, "What?" The Starwood Festival is a very prominent pagan slash magical event that happens every July. This was the 38th year that it's been going on. Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson are probably the two best known people who have been presenters there, which gives me something else in common with those gentlemen. I've been a regular presenter there, I think, for over a decade, maybe like, I think I've been a presenter there like 14 or 15 times. My first Starwood was in 2000, and I didn't, you know, show up there the first time and become a speaker or anything, but within a couple years, I was managing to con them into putting me on the speakers list. Um, so I'm well known enough there that, as I'm riding my bike up and down the main drag of Wisteria, people I don't recognize look at me, "Oh, hi Tom." I go, "Oh, hi." Um, Now, it's also true that I'm a little face blind. Like, I might have sat down with that person for half an hour the day before and talked with them and would not necessarily recognize them the next day. And I am really, really sorry if I've ever done that to you. That part of my brain just does not work very well. Um, so it's maybe a little bit of a low standard to say, if, hey, people I don't recognize are waving at me, hey, I must be famous. But I think I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that uh, there are a significant number of people at Starwood who know who I am and like what I'm bringing there, and are happy to see me. I am in a certain limited small way. I have become one of the cool kids in that environment, and that is weird to me. I am inside my own head and inside my own heart still that kid in fourth grade, sitting in the middle of the lunch table by myself, um, with my book because no one else wanted to sit with me. Nobody wanted to be with me. Well, it was 40 years ago. I'm feeling much better now, but yeah, it's still a formative experience there. So it's a thing. And I'm trying to figure out. Okay, now that I'm past that and I have a presence in certain contexts at least. How do I deal with this? How do I use it? What's the appropriate function of this? And one way that I'm puzzling it out is through the archetype of the king. Now, there's a book about archetypes of the masculine that I have recommended for several years now. King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. Now, my usual cautionary notes here about anytime we talk about gender, I want to be really clear that this is not meant to be exclusive or normative. These are ideas that have helped me figure myself out how to be a little bit less of a miserable asshole in the world. It does not mean that if you're not doing this, you're not a real man. It does not mean that if you're a woman, you can't do this. These are just some things to consider that I think might be useful for other guys. And if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you. Great, wonderful, fine. Rock on with your bad self. It doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. There's more than one way to do it. And also worth noting that I've been working with this quartet of archetypes in a little bit different way, trying to include the idea of the wild man, out of Iron John and stuff like that, and also incorporating some other archetypes that I call the captain, the trickster, the healer, and the preacher. Somewhere down the road, I'll have to do a series of posts about these archetypes. But for now, let's just stick with these basic four. Now, the warrior. Hey, I'm a karate guy. Okay, warrior. I understand that, a little bit. The warrior is the energy of action, of pursuing a goal, accomplishing a mission. I wanted a mission, and for my sins, they gave me one. That's the warrior. There's he's got a job to do. He's got a mission to accomplish. He's going to get it done, regardless of the personal cost. That's the warrior. The magician is the master of hidden knowledge, the student studying in isolation, the artist or craftsman in his workshop, really focused in on that hidden knowledge, that skill that one needs to work to obtain. The occult, the hidden skill, that is what occult means, hidden. The lover is the energy of passion, emotion, connection, also contemplation. It's love in the sexual romantic sense, certainly, but it's also that love of life, that joie de vivre. And okay, I feel like I'm on decent terms with all of those archetypes. I'm not saying it couldn't be better, but yeah, okay, I understand a little bit. But the king, man, yeah, I'm an anarchist, man. What do I want with kings? I don't want to rule anybody. But that's not what the king, the sacred king, the archetype of the sacred king. That's not what it's about. It's not about rulership. And it took me a while to understand this. The sort of king that we're talking about here, there's a cliche that the king reigns but does not rule, which in actual kingship is often honor and born the breach, but that is the idea here. The king does not command. He is not a conqueror. The king is the conduit of blessings for his people. A really great example we can look at here is the Lord of the Rings. Okay, Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. The third volume is the Return of the King, not to be confused with a really, really, really awful misogynist, quote unquote, men's rights. No. We will just purge that from the discussion here. Absolutely. So in Lord of the Rings, the king who is returning is Aragorn, Strider, right? And Aragorn is a war chief. Okay, he fights the orcs and blah 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 blah. And I think that maybe conflating the warrior with the king is a central problem of European culture. But what's really important here, it's not his warriorship that causes Aragorn to be recognized as the king. It's not because he's a great fighter that they recognize he's the king. It's his ability to heal. There's a character in there who says, I think it's before he shows up, says, "It is said in old lore, the hands of the king are the hands of a healer, and so the rightful king could ever be known." That's a good one, okay? It's the king's ability to bring peace and fruitfulness, to knit together that which has been broken and injured, that designates the king. Now, it's not necessarily a physical healing. It's not that the king is going around, Aragorn was not going around and like setting people's broken bones and stitching up wounds and stuff like that. He is doing a spiritual healing. He is lifting from the people what Tolkien calls the black shadow, what we call today really clinical depression that the Nazgul, the Black Riders, have cast upon the land, a despair, a deep despair of the soul, and it is the king who can heal that. The king is the conduit for blessings. In the Chinese character for king, I thought it was very interesting. If you have three horizontal lines, and these represent heaven, mankind, and earth, and through them is a single vertical line, that is the king. The king is the conduit, the connection that connects these three realms of heaven, mankind, and earth. The king is the man whom others want to be with, just because his company brings joy and satisfaction. It makes you feel uplifted. In our modern culture, celebrity, I think, is a distorted reflection of that. And so we have Elvis, the king, right? The great celebrity of the 20th century, and many other royal entertainers. Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Prince, subverted perhaps by Queen. But then we have, we also have some female royal entertainers, Queen Latifah, and people who call Beyonce Queen, and so that's interesting that we seem to we don't have an American royalty, but we kind of make our celebrities into royalty. Um, but it's been my pleasure at Starwood and events like that to spend some time with men who really manifest this idea of the king. Men who share their magic, who embody hospitality and grace, men who just make you feel uplifted by being with them. So back in June, if you go back on our YouTube channel here, you'll find did a little video blog with our friend and blogging neighbor Thorn Mooney, and we talked about Free Spirit Gathering, we talked about Starwood, and we talked a little bit about Oberon Zell. We're talking, maybe we'll see Oberon at Starwood. And if you look at the video, we both go completely fanboy / fangirl about it. And that's because Oberon does the king very well. Just to be with him, to hang out with him, to talk with him, you feel uplifted. You feel filled with an energy through that. When he really looks at you, and he's very sincere, and he conveys a depth, and you feel that he brings you with him, in a sense, is what it feels like. Yeah, he does the king very well. Another gentleman who I've gotten to spend some time with and does that very well is Ian Corrigan. Ian is just, another larger-than-life character with a fantastic sense of hospitality. And when he acknowledges you, when he turns his eyes upon you, and, oh, yes, I know, yes, thank you, boom, you feel uplifted through that, and it's an energy that comes through him. I'm not saying it's less of an energy that is his own, but one gets the sense that he is a conduit for energy. Because Ian, I've learned so much about ritual over the years from watching Ian do the opening circle at Starwood every year, and a few other rituals here and there. But he's an excellent, for lack of a better word, a conduit of that energy. And I did get to sit with Oberon and with Ian at Starwood this past year. And again, if you go back on the YouTube channel here, you'll see the why you should go to Starwood video, and I talked with them for a minute there. And it's funny because after I talked with them a little bit, I sat down, we were just chatting and drinking some beer out there in a field, and I realized later on I had a flashback to high school, and a high school teacher who was scolding us seniors because she was trying to tell us about the wonderful political process, and wow, one of you kids might grow up to serve in the United States Senate. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And we're all like, none of us were at all impressed by the possibility of serving in the United States Senate. I remember her saying, you just all would rather go drink beer in a field somewhere, wouldn't you? And, well, considering the company I would be in if I was in the United States Senate these days, and given the option of sitting in a field, drinking beer with men like Oberon and Ian, yeah, I think it all worked out for the best. So, I certainly cannot compare myself to men like Oberon and Ian, really big name pagans. Oberon, one of the founders of neo-paganism. Ian, a key figure in the development of ADF over the years. A man who has written. You've probably heard chants that Ian has written. Really, one of the big name pagans out there. But they do this very well. The way that they manifest the king, and as I seem to take on a bit more of a role where people look at me and go, oh, hey, yeah, it's that guy. Oh, wow, it's Tom. What should I do with that? And I'm going to try to look to them as a model of how I can hopefully pull down some of that energy, and hopefully if I manage to interest people with what I'm doing, maybe I can a little bit give them some of that feeling that these guys have given me through the years. The other thing I wanted to talk about a little bit here, that I talk about in the blog post, is getting a little seasonal appropriate here. This was the first Starwood since my father passed away last fall, and that put me in a whole new relationship with my ancestors. And the message that kept kept popping up for me at Starwood was do more ancestor work. And that wasn't just a message for me, by the way. That seemed to be a message directed at all of us. Popped up in several different contexts there. Now, on the one hand, I'm a naturalistic pagan. I do not necessarily believe in the survival of some sort of unique spiritual essence that's non-corporeal and that survives the death of the body. But just as I talk about in another video back on this channel here about pagan atheism, just as the question of do the gods exist can only be answered in context, the question of do our ancestors, do the dead survive in some manner, well, that can only be answered in a context. Yeah, I don't believe that there is some ghost of my father composed of some subtle substance which is not subject to normal physical law, but which nevertheless embodies him and allows him to continue to experience and think in much the same way that happened when he was alive. But we have to ask the question of, well, what was my father? Right? He was not merely just this animate lump of carbon. That animate lump of carbon was the center of a whole vortex of activity, of ideas and thoughts and beliefs that also came into this animate lump of carbon and other animate lumps of carbon. And so a lot of those phenomena are still around. And we could, if we were clever, draw a boundary around them in the world and say, oh, that's Mark Swiss. Is it useful to do that? I think that it is in some context, that we could look at that continuing karma, those continuing chains of cause and effect, and give that the name of our ancestors. So there is a sense in which doing ancestor work is not merely a wish fulfillment, but it's a useful way of looking at the universe, even for a naturalistic pagan like myself. But another idea that came out of Starwood this year, something that I've been contemplating a lot, is, well, what do we do? Not all of our ancestors are great people. My dad was a great guy. I loved him dearly, and I owe him a great deal. But not everybody in the ancestral chain really was. But if we can imagine our ancestors who didn't do so good when they were here, and in a metaphorical sense, if we imagine them waking up in the afterlife, right? Imagine how you felt on some Sundays when you woke up and you look back at what you did on Saturday night, when you had a little too much and things got a little crazy. You wake up Sunday morning, you go, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I got into that shoving match. I can't believe that I told that woman that thing. Oh, it's awful. Oh man, I'm so ready to make amends. Right? Well, let's think about our not so great ancestors waking up in the afterlife and going, oh, what did I do? What did I do? I'm really ready to make amends. I'm really to do some penance here for my sins. So in a sense, maybe those are the guys we have to go to, guys and ladies who we have to go to in the afterlife. We should go to them first. Like, hey, Grandpa, you owe me. You owe the world. Maybe you don't owe me. Maybe you owe the world. Whichever. You didn't do so good while you were here. You got a debt to work off. So I'm going to you first, giving you the opportunity to work off some of that karmic debt. So that's an interesting idea in doing ancestor work. So I will be considering that in the time to come. For those of you who have been in my house before, by the way, as you look around, if you see the room I am in, you might be going, Tom, where are you? I do not recognize that room in your house. This is my shiatsu treatment room, which has been recently renovated. My good friend Mike Gerkless came and stripped the wallpaper off the walls and did a lovely job of painting. So if you are in the Baltimore York corridor and are looking for some interior work, let me recommend Gerkless Painting. You can search that on the Facebook there to find his page. But with the room redone and renovated and reorganized and everything, I moved my spirit slash deity altar into one corner, and we'll talk about that maybe some other time. But I've also set up a little ancestor shrine. I set this up on the equinox a couple weeks ago, and yes. So, and it's just a corner with some family photos in it. So as I say, this is my shiatsu treatment room. I don't want to do something, something too crazy that would that might offend people or whatever. But this is just a corner with some family photos in it. And here, this is the guitar that belonged to my father. He had that when he was a teenager, and he left it behind when he went off to Vietnam. And my uncle picked it up, and it's the guitar that he learned to play on. So it's a fairly powerful family talisman. And over the past few weeks, I've really felt good about having this ancestral energy in the room where I do my healing work. So as we move into Samhain, you might consider doing something similar in your own space. An ancestor altar does not have to be something big and complicated. It doesn't have to be something that draws attention. It could be something that simple, just a few family photos and your intent. Remember, the first step in every magical working is to set your intent, and intent goes a very long way. The photos that I have, a couple of them are ones that I had around. But several of them came off of the Ancestry.com, and a couple came from a cousin of mine. So don't neglect those as sources of family information. The internet is full of information, as you may have noticed by now. But also those collateral branches of the family. You might ask your mom, ask your dad about family stuff, ask your direct ancestors, but going a little off to the side, you might find, this got handed down. Some of these photos I guess got handed down through my aunt, and I don't know if my dad ever even knew they were there. Yeah, so there's that. So yeah, that's all I wanted to talk to you today. Coming up on the Samhain season, I wish you a blessed Samhain. And keep dropping by and watching the video channel here and reading The Zen Pagan at pathos.com, and we'll see you next time.